My daughter slid a folder across the kitchen table and said, "Dad, we need to talk about what you owe us." My son-in-law sat back in his chair with his arms crossed and said nothing. I opened the folder. Inside was a typed document. Rent, utilities, caregiver services, a line item for emotional labor, totaling $34,500 for 11 weeks. I looked up at my daughter. She didn't look away. 3 hours later, I was sitting in my car in a Walmart parking lot at 11:47 p.m. with 18 missed calls on my phone, and something had gone very, very wrong for them. I should have seen it coming. Maybe I did see it, and I just didn't want to believe it. I'm 64 years old. I spent 31 years as a structural engineer for a firm in Columbus, Ohio, and I retired in 2022 with a pension, a 401k, and a paid-off house in Westerville that I'd lived in since my kids were small. My wife, Carolyn, passed in the spring of 2021 pancreatic cancer, 8 weeks from diagnosis to the end, the kind of thing that leaves you standing in a kitchen you've known for 20 years and not recognizing a single cabinet. My daughter is 37. She lives in a 4-bedroom colonial in Dublin, Ohio, with her husband. I'll call him what I called him then, my son-in-law, and their 2 kids. My son is 34. He teaches high school chemistry in Dayton. They're nothing alike, my 2 children. They never were. After Caroline passed, my son called me every Sunday without fail. Sometimes we talked for an hour, sometimes 10 minutes. He never let the call go longer than I wanted, and he never ended it before I was ready. My daughter called when she needed something. I didn't see that clearly at the time. I told myself she was just busier. She had 2 kids, a house, a husband who was always starting some new business that never quite got off the ground. She needed more support. That was how I framed it for 3 years. In September of last year, I decided to sell the house in Westerville. 23 years of memories, and I couldn't keep up with it alone. The yard, the gutters, the way the furnace made a sound in February that I'd always let Carolyn worry about. I listed it, sold it in 2 weeks for $387,000, and after the mortgage payoff and fees, I walked away with $241,000. My daughter called me the day the sale closed. "Dad, why don't you come stay with us while you figure out your next move? The kids would love having you here. We have the finished basement. It's basically an apartment." I said yes. I transferred $30,000 into her account the following week because she mentioned the basement needed some work to make it comfortable, and I wanted to contribute. She thanked me, said she'd get a contractor started right away. I moved in on a Thursday in early October. The basement was not finished. It had a bed, a mini fridge, and a space heater. The walls were still drywall and exposed studs on one side. I didn't say anything. I told myself it was temporary. I should tell you about my son-in-law. He's 41. He's had 4 business ideas in 6 years, a food truck, a mobile pet grooming service, a consulting firm that never seemed to consult anyone, and most recently a residential property management company that managed, as far as I could tell, exactly 1 property. His own. He works hard at the idea of working. Carolyn used to say that quietly, just to me, after he'd leave family dinners. She wasn't cruel about it. She was just honest. The first week at my daughter's house was fine. I cooked dinner twice. I helped my grandson with a school project. I watched the news in the basement and went to bed at 10. The second week, my daughter started leaving grocery receipts on the counter with certain items circled, specialty foods I'd supposedly asked for. I hadn't asked for any of them. I paid anyway. It was maybe $80. I didn't think much of it. The third week, my son-in-law suggested I might want to chip in on utilities, since I was using electricity and hot water. I said, "Sure, what were you thinking?" He said he'd have to look at the bills and get back to me. He never did. Then came the 5th week, the Tuesday night. My daughter made pot roast, my mother's recipe, the one I taught her when she was a teenager, and she set the table like it was a special occasion. Good plates, candles. My son-in-law was there. He was in a good mood, which was unusual. My grandkids had already eaten and gone upstairs. After dinner, my daughter went to the kitchen and came back with a manila folder. "Dad," she said, sitting down, "we've been going over the household finances, and we realized we haven't been properly accounting for everything. We want to make sure things are fair." She set the folder in front of me and opened it. I read the first page slowly. Rent, $2,500 per month, times 11 weeks, prorated. Utilities, $400 per month. Grocery contribution, $600 per month. Grocery contribution, $600 per month. Caregiver coordination services, which I learned when I asked, meant my daughter occasionally reminding me to take my blood pressure medication, $800 per month. Total $34,500, payment due 30 days from today. I read it twice. Then I read the header again. The document was titled Household Cost Sharing Agreement. Resident Contribution Summary. "What is this?" I said. My daughter leaned forward. "Dad, you have savings. You got a lot from the house. It's only fair that you contribute to the household you're living in." My son-in-law nodded. He was studying the table. $34,000, I said, for 11 weeks. "We sat down and looked at what everything actually costs," she said. "This is fair market value." I sat there for a moment. I looked at my son-in-law. He still wouldn't look up. I looked at my daughter, who met my eyes without flinching. Then I looked back at the document. At the bottom right corner, in small grey text, was a line I almost missed. File created, August 14. Auto-saved, August 14. Auto-saved, August 14, 3:22 p.m. I moved in on October 3rd. This document was created 7 weeks before I arrived. I didn't let my face change. I'd been an engineer for 31 years. I know how to read a room and not tip my hand. I picked up the folder, closed it, and set it back on the table. "I'll need some time to look this over," I said. "Of course," my daughter said. "We're not trying to rush you, but we do need something by the end of the month." "Understood," I said. I went downstairs. I sat on the edge of the bed. My hands were steady. My mind was not. She had made that document in August. She had called me in September, warm and welcoming. She had cashed my $30,000 check and not touched the basement walls. She had cooked pot roast with my mother's recipe and lit candles and waited for the right moment to slide a folder across a table she'd been planning to slide it across for 2 months. I picked up my phone and took photos of every page. The document. The file creation date. All of it. Then I packed a bag, walked upstairs, said I was going to get some air, and drove to a Walmart on Sawmill Road and sat in the parking lot for 45 minutes. My phone rang at 11:47 p.m. Then again, then again, then again. By midnight, I had 18 missed calls, 12 from my daughter, 4 from my son-in-law, 2 from a number I didn't recognize. I didn't answer any of them. I had $241,000 in a savings account and a folder full of photographs, and somewhere in the back of my head, a question I couldn't stop asking. How long had this been the plan? I drove to a Hampton Inn off I-270 and checked in for a week. I called my son the next morning at 7. He answered before the second ring. "Dad, what's going on? She called me last night. What did she tell you? That you'd had a disagreement about money and you left. She said you were being unreasonable." I told him the whole thing. The folder, the dates, the $30,000 I'd already given, the caregiver coordination fee for reminding me to take a pill I'd been managing on my own for 4 years. He was quiet for a long time. "Dad," he said finally, "that document was created before you even sold the house." 7 weeks before I moved in, I said. Another long silence. "Then, what do you need?" "I need someone to help me think clearly," I said. "And I need you to not call your sister until I figure out what I'm doing." "Done," he said. "Whatever you need." I spent that day in the Hampton Inn room with my laptop, my phone, and 31 years of methodical thinking. I am a structural engineer. I build things that don't fall down by accounting for every stress point before anyone sets foot on the structure. I was going to apply that same approach here. First I called an elder law attorney. I'd never needed one before, but I'd read enough news to know the phrase elder financial abuse existed for a reason. I found a woman in Columbus, 22 years of practice, board certified in elder law, and her assistant fit me in for a phone consultation that afternoon. Her name was Ms. Okafor. She was direct, and she didn't waste time. Based on what you're describing, she said, the premeditated nature of the document, the request for payment that has no basis in any signed agreement, and the fact that you've already transferred $30,000 under what appear to be false pretenses, this falls squarely into the category of financial exploitation of an older adult. Ohio Revised Code 2913.0 covers theft by deception. The $30,000 transfer made under false pretenses is potentially criminal. I don't want to send my daughter to prison, I said. That may not be your decision alone, she said, but what you want right now is documentation and leverage. Let's talk about what you have and what you need. We talked for 50 minutes. When I hung up, I had a list. Over the next 5 days, I built a file that would have made my old project managers proud. Bank records showing the $30,000 transfer. Text messages from my daughter in September. Dad, we'd love to have you. The kids miss you. The basement will be so comfortable. Dated 6 weeks after the document was quietly created on her computer. Screenshots of the document with the file creation metadata visible. A statement from my bank confirming I was the sole account holder on my savings. Medical records showing I had been managing my own blood pressure medication independently since 2019, 3 years before I ever set foot in her house. I also called a contractor. I described the basement, the exposed studs, the space heater, the drywall, and asked what a proper finishing job would have cost. He said $8,000 to $12,000. I asked if $30,000 was a reasonable estimate for the work I'd described needing to be done. He laughed, not meanly, just honestly. On day 5, my son drove up from Dayton. He brought a casserole his wife had made, and we sat in my hotel room and spread everything out on the desk. He went through it all slowly. He's a science teacher. He thinks in evidence. Dad, he said when he'd read everything, do you know the woman Mum used to call her work wife, her friend from the school district? The one she had lunch with every month for like 10 years before she got sick? I said yes. I knew who he meant. A woman named Beverly who'd retired from the Columbus City schools and moved out to Hilliard. She reached out to me last month, my son said carefully. She said she'd heard through someone that you were staying with my sister. She wanted to make sure you were okay. She mentioned that my sister had called her last year, out of the blue, asking about Mum's life insurance policy. What it paid out. Whether you'd mentioned any estate plans. I sat very still. She didn't think much of it at the time, my son said. She just thought it was a strange call. I thought about the pot roast, my mother's recipe, the candles. When did that call happen? I asked. He checked his phone. Beverly said it was July. July, 1 month before the document was created. I called Beverly that evening. She confirmed everything my son had told me. My daughter had called her in late July, mentioned she was trying to help plan for Dad's future and wanted to understand his financial situation better. Beverly, who did not know my daughter well and found the call odd, had told her nothing and then largely forgotten about it until she heard I'd moved in. The picture had been there the whole time. I just hadn't been willing to see it. I called Ms. Okafor the next morning with the new information. She added it to the file. Then she drafted a letter, a single page, precise and legal and completely without heat, stating that the $34,500 invoice had no basis in any signed agreement, that the $30,000 previously transferred constituted a personal loan subject to repayment, and that any further pursuit of the claimed debt or interference with my finances would result in a formal complaint with the Ohio Attorney General's Elder Justice Initiative, as well as civil action under Ohio law. She also drafted a promissory note. If my daughter signed it, she was acknowledging the $30,000 as a loan. If she didn't sign, the letter went to the AG's office. We scheduled a meeting. My daughter's house. Neutral enough for her to feel comfortable. I asked my son to be there as a witness. I asked Beverly, who surprised me by agreeing immediately and with no hesitation to attend as well. My son-in-law opened the door. He was in a different kind of mood than the pot roast night, tighter around the jaw, eyes moving too much. My daughter came in from the kitchen. She looked at Beverly and her expression shifted for just a half second before she arranged her face back into something that looked like calm. "Dad," she said, "I'm glad you came back. We can work through this." We sat at the same table. I set the file on the surface between us. I didn't open it immediately. "I want to tell you something first," I said. "I'm not here because I'm angry. I'm here because I want to give you one opportunity to make this right quietly, and I want Beverly and your brother to witness that I gave you that opportunity." She looked at Beverly. Beverly looked back at her, steady and unsmiling. I opened the file. I walked through it the same way I would have walked a client through a structural analysis, systematically, without theatrics. The document creation date. The timeline of her September calls to me. The contractor's estimate versus the $30,000 I'd given her. The call to Beverly in July. The itemized invoice with no basis in any agreement I had ever signed. My son-in-law's face went through several things while I was talking. My daughter's face did not. When I finished, I slid the promissory note across the table. "If you sign this, the $30,000 becomes a documented loan. We agree on a repayment schedule. The invoice disappears. We move forward as a family, and no one outside this room ever needs to know this happened." "And if I don't?" she asked. "Then Miss Okafor files the complaint Monday morning." She picked up the note. She read it. She set it down. She picked up the pen. "This is unfair," she said. "Sign it or don't," I said, not unkindly, just clearly. She signed it. My son-in-law signed as a co-obligor. My son and Beverly witnessed. I stood up, picked up the file, and said goodbye to my grandkids, who were watching something upstairs and didn't know anything had happened at all. I hope it stays that way. In the parking lot, my son hugged me. He's not a hugger. He held on for a moment longer than usual. "You okay?" he said. "I will be," I said. I was already thinking about the next part. I'd been in the Hampton Inn for 11 days by that point. I had the promissory note, the documentation, and $241,000 in savings that no one had gotten their hands on. But I also had something else I hadn't dealt with yet. That evening, I sat with my laptop and logged into an email account I shared with my wife for household bills. A habit from early in our marriage that we'd never broken. It still had both our names on it. After she passed, I used it for utilities, insurance, subscription renewals. I hadn't thought much about it. I searched my daughter's name. There were 43 emails I'd never seen. The oldest was from 3 years ago. A few months after Carolyn died, my daughter had emailed herself, using our shared address as the sender, a note that read, "Dad's accounts, pension approx $800, 401k est 199k, house equity est 200k. Beverly says he hasn't $K. Beverly says he hasn't updated the will since 2018. Check on POA situation." I sat with that for a while. The most recent email in the chain was from August, the same month as the document, and it was a message to someone I didn't recognize. A first name only, Terence. It read, "He's coming in October. Should have access to the basement account by November. The folder is ready. Let me know if you need the other docs." I didn't know who Terence was. I didn't know what the basement account was. I knew I needed to find out before I did anything else. I called Miss Okafor the next morning and read her the emails. She was quiet for a moment. "Who is Terence?" she asked. "I don't know yet." "Find out," she said, "and don't touch anything in that email account. Forward everything to me. We may need it." I forwarded every email in the thread to her that morning. Then I spent 2 days doing something I'm not proud of, but don't regret. I looked through 3 years of my daughter's social media with the methodical patience of a man who once spent 4 months reviewing load-bearing calculations for a parking structure in downtown Columbus. Terence, it turned out, was her husband's brother. He lived in Cincinnati. He had worked, according to his own public profile, in financial consulting, a phrase that in my experience tends to mean something specific when it comes with no company name attached. He and my son-in-law followed each other on every platform. They'd tagged each other in posts going back 8 years. I called Ms. Okafor with that information. The brother may have been the one advising them on the scheme, she said. That would potentially implicate him as well. I'm going to recommend we bring in a forensic accountant to look at the $30,000. I want to know where it went. It took the accountant 6 days. The $30,000 had been deposited into my daughter's personal account on October 5th, 2 days after I moved in. By November 1st, $22,000 of it had been transferred in 3 installments to an LLC registered in Delaware, DRT Holdings. The registered agent for DRT Holdings was Terrence. $2,000 had gone to a contractor for the basement. I sat in the hotel room and thought about Carolyn, what she would have said. She would have been devastated, and then she would have gotten very quiet, and then she would have said something precise and true that I wouldn't have thought of. She was always better at reading people. I was good at structures. She was good at what held them up. I thought about the promissory note, already signed, and I thought about Terrence and the LLC and the $22,000 and a document created in August. Ms. Okafor filed the complaint with the Ohio Attorney General's Elder Justice Initiative on a Thursday. She also sent a civil demand letter to my son-in-law and to Terrence directly, demanding return of the $22,000 transferred to DRT Holdings, plus interest, on the grounds of fraud and conversion. Terrence called my son-in-law within the hour. My son-in-law called my daughter. My daughter called me 11 times between 7 p.m. and midnight. I answered on the 12th call, around 12:30 in the morning. Dad. Her voice was different. Not the business-like tone from the pot roast dinner. Not the careful warmth from the September phone calls. Something raw. Dad, Terrence is saying you filed something with the state. What did you file? A complaint, I said. For what? Financial exploitation. It's a thing that exists. Silence. Dad, I'm your daughter. I know, I said. Terrence didn't do anything wrong. He was just helping us with investments. He was helping you invest money you took from me under false pretenses, I said. That's different. More silence. Then her voice went very small. The kids are going to know something is wrong. Then you should have thought about that in August, I said. I wasn't cruel about it. I wasn't triumphant. I was just tired, and I was done pretending the thing in front of me wasn't the thing in front of me, wasn't the thing in front of me. I hung up, and I slept 8 hours, which was the best sleep I'd had since Carolyn got sick. The civil case moved slowly, the way civil cases do. The AG's complaint moved faster. Within 6 weeks, investigators from the Elder Justice Initiative made contact with my daughter and son-in-law. Within 8 weeks, Terrence's attorney reached out to Ms. Okafor to discuss settlement. Within 10 weeks, I had a cashier's check for $22,000 plus $1,400 in interest and fees delivered to Ms. Okafor's office. The promissory note for the $30,000 loan remained in place. My daughter made the first payment, $500, in January. On time. I didn't celebrate. I just noted it. I found an apartment in Worthington, north of Columbus, in December. 2nd floor, 2 bedrooms, a balcony that faces east so I get the morning light. I paid the deposit and first month's rent in cash and signed a 12-month lease and sat in the empty living room on a folding chair I'd bought at Target and felt something I'd genuinely forgotten I was allowed to feel. Quiet. Just quiet. My son helped me move in. His wife came too. She is warm and practical, and I am grateful for her every time I'm around her. They brought food and helped me hang things on the walls. I put up one photo from my wedding day, 1986. Carolyn, in a white dress, laughing at something I'd said off camera. I put up a photo of my 2 kids as children, maybe 10 and 7, making faces at a barbecue. I kept that one up because it's true. We were that family, once. Whatever happened after doesn't erase what was before. My daughter called in January. After the first payment cleared, she said she was sorry. She said Terrence had convinced them it was a good plan, and she hadn't really thought about what it meant. I listened. I didn't say much. I told her I appreciated her saying so, and that I needed more time before I'd know what a relationship between us looked like going forward. She accepted that. That was something. My son and I have dinner most Sundays now, either in Worthington or in Dayton, back and forth. My grandkids have come over twice. My daughter brought them, stayed for an hour, was polite and careful. The kids just wanted to watch TV and eat popcorn and sit with me on the couch, which is what kids mostly want, in my experience. I started volunteering at a senior center in March. They needed someone to help with a financial literacy class, teaching older adults how to read account statements, how to spot unusual activity, how to ask questions before signing anything. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a counselor, but I'm a structural engineer, and the principle is the same. You find the weak point before the weight comes down on it, not after. In April, I got a letter from the Ohio AG's office confirming the case had been closed. My daughter and son-in-law had completed the required financial counseling. Terrence's LLC had been dissolved. No criminal charges were filed, which I had not pushed for. I sat with that letter for a long time. Carolyn would have read it and then set it down and looked at me and probably said something about how the point was never the letter. The point was the morning, the quiet, the east-facing balcony. The fact that I am 64 years old and still here, still thinking clearly, still choosing what to do with the days I have left, and not having those days chosen for me by someone who mistook my love for limitlessness. I'm not telling this story because I want sympathy. I don't need it. I'm telling it because I sat across from my daughter at a table with a manufactured invoice in front of me, and I almost just paid it. Because it was easier. Because I didn't want the conflict. Because she is my daughter, and I wanted to believe the best about her. If you're older, and someone you love is asking you to sign something, or transfer something, or contribute to the household, slow down. Read the header. Check the date. Ask who benefits, and whether you'd still agree if there was no relationship in the room. The money can be replaced. The quiet I found in that Worthington apartment, after 31 years of building things that hold weight, that took longer, but I found it, and it's mine.